created Missouri's Food for America specifically to oppose Amendment 1. A little bit about me. I'm a family farmer. Farm with my father, son, brother-in-law on our farm. I'm the third generation. I lost an election in 10. Went back home to the farm. Quite happy. Wasn't looking for a fight. And a couple things happened that if someone would have told me they would have transpired in Missouri in our legislature, I would have never believed it. First, our legislature thought it wise, and I don't know who was really pushing this for them to do this, to allow foreign corporations to own our farmland in the state of Missouri. And I don't know who's pushing that, whose agenda. They thought it was so important, but the governor vetoed it, and they overrode the veto. They thought it was very important that foreign corporations should own our farmland. Subsequently, very shortly after that, Smithfield Foods is bought out by Scheinway, which is now WH Group. So today in Missouri, we have 50,000 acres of our farmland owned by a foreign corporation. 27% of the pork produced in this country is owned by a foreign corporation. The largest producer of beef in this country today, foreign corporation. The largest producer of poultry, foreign corporation. And I served time in the legislature, and when I saw this amendment come out, it's very vague, written intentionally. And the real problem I see, the thing that both sides on this, if you're a pro or a con, we both agree, it's going to be sorted out in the courts. I want people to understand, sometimes court decisions don't work out very well. If you'd have told me 25 years ago I couldn't save my own seed, I wouldn't have believed you. We lost that right as farmers all across this country. The Supreme Court decision, Pioneer versus Monsanto, to retain our own seeds on our own farm. Our soil, our toil, and it's still not yours. A vague constitutional amendment that would transfer the rights that family farmers already have in statute. We already have the right to farm in statutes. Like as I told them, I helped put some of them there. If someone moves in next to you, they have to put up with your sounds and sights and smells. We already have these rights as family farmers. And guess what? We excluded corporations from those rights. And there's an old saying that I think people need to understand. That's very true. I served with the legislature in the House. He's passed away now, but Representative Byrd, he was a constitutional attorney. And he'd come walking in the chamber about every day, and he'd always say, remember, guys, the Constitution trumps all. The Constitution trumps all. So any of the statutes that are in statute right now will be subject to a court challenge. Any local ordinances subject to a court challenge. The legislature and local control, except, and this is the only thing that's not vague in the constitutional amendment, except first-class counties with a charter form of government. That's who's going to be left in the state of Missouri who can regulate agriculture. That's it. Senator Justice out of Kansas City saw fit to add an amendment to protect her cities. So I think it's something that I believe that government's best when it's closest to the people it serves. And to have a constitutional amendment that will strip those powers away from the local entities, strip those powers away from state entities. You know, there could very well be some unintended consequences from this thing. For those guys who think they don't like the Missouri DNR, if we can't regulate you out of the state, you're going to fall under federal regulation. When the state DNR quits doing it, the feds take over. I just thought this thing was so egregious that transferring my rights to a foreign corporation, my rights that I enjoy as a family farmer, putting all the rights on the side of the fence of the farmer and leaving no rights on the other side of the fence for a neighbor, was dangerous. I think the Joplin Grove said it best. Why not have a right to a constitutional amendment, a right to run a nursing home, right to run a restaurant? You want to do it like you want. You don't want any regulations in there. Then they could treat our parents and grandparents however they wanted. Then they could serve us food however they wanted without cleanliness. This thing's dangerous, vague, subject to interpretation by the courts. That's why I created Missouri's Food for America. It's a broad coalition of agriculture groups, faith groups, animal welfare groups, what I call foodies. The libertarians have come out on our side. What I call the constitutionalists, folks we're working with in Southwest Missouri, they understand that food security is an important issue. We need to be looking past a past battle and think about the long-term consequences of this amendment. I was on a radio show with Blake Hurst, and Blake is for this, and I just asked him, well, Blake, could you believe 25 years ago if someone told you you wouldn't be able to save your own seed beans? Would you believe it if they had told you that? And I said, you know, my dad and I were driving around the farm a couple years ago, and he couldn't believe how straight my son was driving a piece of equipment. And I had to finally break it to my dad that he wasn't even driving that piece of equipment. It was driving itself. And so we need to understand that agriculture is a dynamic, ever-changing industry. And to give blanket immunity to one segment of the industry forward into the future, as far as we can see, because there's never been a constitutional amendment that's been overturned in Missouri, is dangerous for us as family farmers, dangerous for rural communities, because I promise you, that corporation that bought that 50,000 acres that answers to a communist form of government up in North Missouri here does not care about their neighbors, does not care about their community, and does not care about this state like everyone sitting in this room does. They don't answer to us. And they'll be able to take that constitutional right, once they grab it as a farmer, take that to court and say, we are farmers, we want the right to farm as much as we want. Be darned that 1% that they limited us to. And we need to remember in the 70s why we stopped foreign corporations from owning our farmland in the 70s. For those of us who remember, the Japanese came in. There was a huge currency manipulation. They had a huge advantage over buying land. In my era, I remember it. They were buying ground up like crazy, especially timber ground. They had a huge advantage over us because their yen went twice as far as our dollar. Does anybody know or believe that China might be in the business of manipulating currency? Think about it. If you want your kid and your grandkid to have a fair shot at the land next to you, be wary of this thing. You give China that right, I'm going to tell you, they're going to take it as far as they can. Shucks, in a fun fell swoop, they bought the largest hog farm in the United States of America. I'm telling you, there's a lot of things and a lot of dangers in this constitutional amendment in the future. I know we were upset. People were upset about Proposition B in 2010. But you got to remember, that was a statutory change. If you want to do things like this, do it in the statutes, not in the Constitution. The governor and the legislature got together and they could modify extreme measures. Once this thing's passed, it's the Constitution. There is no modifying. There's just a court interpretation. Don't mess with the Constitution, is my message to people today. Don't mess with it. It is not worth the risk that we're putting out there. I understand when they say they don't like outside groups, but you better get your head screwed on straight and think about it. There ain't nothing more outside than a Chinese corporation owning our food. Food security, huge importance in the future. Ownership has its privileges. You ever heard that?